Everybody came here for the same reason. They want to understand how a man who once carried himself like boxing royalty ended up asking another grown man to cover his Uber on a live stream watched by thousands. They want to know how someone who made millions could stand in a courtroom and claim he had only $13 to his name. But the truth is, the money disappearing is not even the saddest part of the Adrien Broner story. The saddest part is watching a man slowly lose the identity he built his entire life around, while the whole world watches in real time. Because this was never just about boxing. It was never just about cash, jewelry, lawsuits, or social media clips. This is the story of a kid who escaped one nightmare only to build another one with his own hands, and by the time he realized it, the performance had already swallowed the person underneath it. Long before the headlines and livestream clips, before the fur coats and the stacks of cash, there was Cincinnati. Not the polished version people put on postcards, but the hard version. The version where survival came before dreams. Adrien Broner was born into a world where danger was ordinary and where young boys learned quickly that weakness could cost you more than embarrassment. Violence wasn't something distant in his neighborhood, it was routine. It lived in the streets, in the arguments on corners, in the people who disappeared too young, in the constant pressure to become hard before life hardened you itself. By the time he was 6 years old, boxing gloves were put on his hands. That changed everything, but not in some dramatic movie scene where a child suddenly sees destiny. It happened slowly, quietly. The gym became the first place in his life where effort actually meant something. In the streets, rules changed every day. People betrayed each other. Circumstances crushed people regardless of how badly they wanted better lives. But inside the gym, the rules stayed consistent. You trained, you improved, you practiced combinations, and eventually they became instinct. You put in hours, and your body reflected those hours back to you. For a kid growing up surrounded by chaos, that structure was powerful. Boxing gave Adrien Broner something he had probably never fully experienced before: control. And he became extraordinary at it. 300 wins in 319 amateur fights is not normal. That is the kind of record that makes trainers stop talking when your name comes up. That is the kind of dominance that tells people a fighter is operating on another level entirely. Before he ever became famous, before television cameras followed him around, people inside boxing already understood what they were looking at. His reflexes were unreal. His counterpunching instincts looked natural in a way coaches spend decades trying unsuccessfully to teach. He moved like someone born for the sport. When he turned professional in 2008, he carried more than talent into the ring. He carried anger, hunger, pride, the kind of chip on your shoulder that only comes from feeling overlooked your entire life. Cincinnati made him tough. Boxing made him dangerous. But somewhere during that rise, another version of Adrien Broner started forming too. That version called itself About Billions. At first, it looked like confidence. Then it became branding. Then eventually it became something much deeper than either of those things. About Billions was not just a slogan. It became his identity. It became the answer to every insecurity, every memory of poverty, every moment from childhood that made him feel small. Money became proof. Proof that he mattered. Proof that he escaped. Proof that the streets didn't beat him. And for a while, the world rewarded it. He became a 4-division world champion, super featherweight, lightweight, super lightweight, welterweight. In only a few years, Adrien Broner accomplished what most fighters can't even dream about. The money exploded. $1-million purses started arriving regularly. Huge fights, massive attention, celebrity treatment. He walked into arenas draped in luxury while entourages followed behind him like moving parades. The problem is that once somebody builds their identity around appearing rich, the spending itself becomes part of survival. People from stable backgrounds often see financial discipline as common sense, but for someone who grew up feeling invisible, displaying wealth can feel emotional instead of practical. Every chain becomes a statement. Every expensive car becomes revenge against the life you escaped. Every stack of money flashed online becomes proof that the world can no longer ignore you. That is the trap Adrien Broner fell into. The money came fast, but the lifestyle grew even faster. Entourages expanded, jewelry multiplied, casinos welcomed him. Everybody wanted to be around him while the checks kept clearing, and because About Billions had become bigger than Adrien Broner himself, slowing down no longer felt possible. Pulling back would have meant admitting the image wasn't real anymore. And what happens when your image becomes more important than reality? You protect the image at all costs. Even as the cracks started spreading, the performance continued. The dangerous thing about boxing is that the sport keeps perfect records whether fighters want to acknowledge them or not. Bodies change, reflexes slow, discipline fades, damage accumulates. The ring always tells the truth eventually. When Broner fought Manny Pacquiao in 2019, people saw it. Pacquiao controlled the fight in ways the younger Broner probably never would have allowed years earlier. The athletic sharpness was fading. The explosiveness wasn't the same. The aura had cracks in it now. Excuses followed, like they always do in boxing. Preparation, timing, weight issues. But insiders knew something had shifted. Then came the Blair Cobbs fight years later, and the remaining illusions started disappearing completely. That loss didn't feel shocking. It felt confirming. Like the sport finally making official what had already been quietly obvious. Meanwhile, outside the ring, the financial collapse had already started moving publicly. The lawsuits began stacking up. An $855,000 civil judgment, then the jewelry lawsuit demanding over $1 million in unpaid invoices. These weren't rumors anymore. These were court documents, real debts, real consequences. The lifestyle that once looked untouchable was now leaving paper trails behind it. And then came the moment that changed everything. The courtroom. In 2020, Adrien Broner sat under oath explaining his finances to a judge. This man had once flaunted endless wealth online. He built his entire persona around abundance, yet now he claimed he had only $13 in cash. $13. Not 13,000. Not even 1,300. 13. The number itself sounded surreal, coming from someone who once carried himself like one of boxing's biggest stars. But the moment became even more devastating when the judge pulled up Instagram photos showing Broner holding stacks of cash, and his explanation somehow made the entire thing sadder. He claimed the money belonged to wealthy friends who gave him cash to pose with online. Think about that for a second. A man who built his identity around financial dominance was now sitting in court explaining that the money in his own pictures wasn't actually his. The judge held him in contempt. That moment felt bigger than legal trouble. It felt symbolic. The performance had finally collapsed publicly. No more distance existed between reality and illusion anymore. Then came the live streams. The clips spread everywhere because they were impossible to ignore. Adrien Broner appearing visibly compromised, getting removed from interviews, looking disconnected from himself, asking someone else to pay for his Uber because he didn't have the money. I don't got bread. 4 words that hit harder than any punch he ever took inside the ring, because millions of people remembered the old version of Adrien Broner. The fur coats, the diamonds, the giant rolls of cash, the arrogance, the confidence, the endless performances of abundance. Watching him reduced to moments like this felt less like celebrity gossip and more like witnessing somebody unravel in public. And the saddest part is that somewhere underneath all the headlines and jokes, there is still a fighter inside him trying to survive. At 36 years old, Adrien Broner is still talking about comebacks, still chasing one more opportunity, one more fight, one more chance to prove he still matters. Some people hear that and call it delusion, but maybe it's something deeper than that. Maybe boxing is the only language he truly trusts. Think about it. Since childhood, fighting has been the one consistent thing in his life. Before fame, before money, before lawsuits, before social media, before the About Billions persona swallowed everything else. Boxing was the thing that saved him from becoming another forgotten kid trapped by his environment. So now that everything else has collapsed, what else is he supposed to hold on to? That's what makes this story heartbreaking. Not the money disappearing, not even the lawsuits. It's the realization that Adrien Broner may have spent so many years performing a character that he eventually lost track of where the performance ended and where the real person began. And yet somehow, despite all of it, people still root for him, because underneath the controversies and chaos, people remember the kid from Cincinnati with extraordinary talent. They remember the fighter whose reflexes looked supernatural. They remember the young champion who genuinely seemed capable of becoming one of boxing's all-time greats. That version of Adrien Broner was real. The tragedy is that the world rewarded the performance around him just as much as the talent itself, and eventually, the performance became impossible to maintain. Today, the man who once earned millions is reportedly selling promotional posts online for a few $100s. The same name that once headlined major boxing events now appears in viral clips for entirely different reasons. The mythology has faded, the lifestyle collapsed, the image cracked beyond repair. But the story still isn't finished. That's the strange thing about human beings. As long as someone is still breathing, the ending remains unwritten. Maybe Broner never fully recovers professionally. Maybe the damage, financially, emotionally, physically, is already too deep. Or maybe somewhere inside all this chaos, the 6-year-old kid who first walked into a boxing gym still finds a way to fight his way forward one more time. Nobody knows. And honestly, that uncertainty is what makes this story impossible to look away from. Because deep down, this isn't just a story about Adrien Broner. It's about what happens when a person builds their worth around an image they can no longer afford to maintain. It's about identity, ego, survival, pride. The terrifying feeling of watching your own life drift away while the world watches from a distance. And maybe that's why so many people still can't stop paying attention. Not because they enjoy the downfall, but because somewhere in this story, they recognize something painfully human.